All right, we'll go ahead and kick things off. So everyone, thank you for joining this webinar today on this Friday. We will be talking about how to enable quick and secure work from home with Nutanix Xi Frame. Frame is our desktop as a service solution from Nutanix. My name is Yingzi Zhao. I am the Director of Sales for the Americas for Nutanix Xi Frame. And I'll be kind of going through today an overview of Frame. I'll also talk about the challenges of work from home and how Nutanix solutions such as Frame can help address those, especially in this climate where, as we all are aware, work from home is becoming increasingly more important. And then we'll also kind of dive into what Frame is, what Frame isn't, our core features and functionality, how you would deploy a Frame for your environment, both either public cloud or on-prem. And then we'll show you a demo in terms of what it looks like, right? In terms of what your users can expect to see when they log into Frame and use it either to access their virtual desktop, virtual applications, and also show you just how easy it is to deploy from a control plane perspective. And then lastly, we'll kind of wrap up, and we do have a work from home campaign going on where you can get 30 days access to Frame for free, and we'll show you how to sign up and get your trial account going. So with that said, we'll just dive right on in. And we'll be pausing throughout the webinar for any questions. So if you do have questions, please put them into the Q&A. And then Rena, I'll let you kind of monitor that. And if you want to pause me every now and then when we get a good list of questions, I can sort of pause and address them.
Sounds great.
Perfect. All right. So first off, when it comes to work from home, and there's some common challenges across the board when you're trying to enable an initiative like this, right? The first would be just supporting the devices that your users may be using to access, especially if you're mostly providing like a workstation in the office. When they go home, if they don't have like a work laptop and they're using their BYO personal device, making sure that those devices can all be supported. That's kind of the first challenge. Same thing with software licensing and making sure whatever applications and operating systems you're looking to deploy out there are properly licensed, and making sure that that is addressed. So you're not over consuming those licenses, right? That's also very important. Security, data security is obviously very huge and very important in a work from home scenario where if you're providing these, letting the data leave your security boundaries in your data center, whether it's your private data center or in public cloud, making sure that that is secure and securely accessed, and is not, if you lose an asset, right, be able to recover that data. That's also a huge importance. And then just be able to make sure that users are able to access all the applications required to do their job, right? So if you're using O365 today or other SaaS applications, that may be less of a concern, but there's specific applications that require access to databases in your data center or application backends that may not be available externally. That's also a big concern for a lot of customers. And then in terms of just supporting a wide variety of peripheral devices. So when you're in the office, you have your network printers, it's easy to print to those. But when you are doing a work from home scenario, users are going to bring whatever peripheral devices that they want to use and expect it to work, right? In a work from home scenario. So being able to support those easily and effectively is also a challenge. And then I would say the last part would probably be around just maintaining a consistent user experience and minimizing troubleshooting efforts for your help desk and for your administrators. That's also something to be keep top of mind. So the purpose of this webinar is kind of we'll discuss how you can overcome these challenges quickly with Nutanix end user computing solutions such as Frame. So first of all, how Frame fits into the overall end user computing platform of Nutanix. So Nutanix, we're probably most well known for our HCI platform that's been an industry leader in deploying for HCI, and also providing a platform to deploy your more traditional VDI solutions out there, such as Citrix or VMware. So for customers out there that are looking to deploy Citrix and deploy VMware, just know that we have an industry-leading HCI solution, AOS, and also Nutanix AHV, our hypervisor, that you can deploy on. So if you're interested in that, certainly reach out to your Nutanix account teams, and they can help you address that piece. But the purpose of today is really to talk about Frame. So Frame is our hybrid and multi-cloud desktop as a service solution. This is really an ability to deploy your virtual desktops either on-prem on Nutanix AHV, or also deployed into public cloud as well. So more of a for short term, and certainly for much quicker setup, right? Is where Frame fits into the picture. All right, so the kind of the keys again to enabling work from home. Step one is again end user device support and management. Step two is really secure external access, authentication, what kind of IDPs to use to allow your users to come in and make sure that they're properly managed and that we have proper policies and permissions for those users. Providing access to corporate desktops, applications, and data. The infrastructure required to support these virtual desktop or virtual application VMs that users will be accessing. And then lastly, really making it easy to deploy, easy to manage for your administrator, especially for folks that may not necessarily have experience with VDI or end user computing, right? And so making it able to quickly deploy and quickly manage. All right, so what is Nutanix XiFrame? So Nutanix XiFrame, we are software as a service. So you can think of us in the same lines of ServiceNow or Salesforce, Workday. The difference is that the solutions we provide is delivering a Windows app or desktop to your users, right? And we, just like any other SaaS solution, we are primarily HTML5 based. So as long as your endpoint device has a HTML5 web browser on it, it'll work with Frame. So whether that's Chrome, whether that's Edge, Firefox, Safari, right? Those will all be supported today, whether it's on a MacBook or whether it's on a Chromebook, a Windows laptop, iPad. Those will all be supported with Frame today. We're also true hybrid and multi-cloud Daas, and what that really means is that from the same environment, you have the ability to deploy your Frame workload VMs, and again, that can be a full desktop or just specific applications or subset of applications, either on-prem on Nutanix AHV, so Acropolis hypervisor, or you can deploy it into the public cloud. We do support the three major providers, AWS, Azure, and GCP. And the beauty of Frame is that you can deploy to any of these private or public resource locations anywhere in the world from a single control plane. So that control plane is hosted by Nutanix for our customers as a service that is hosted in AWS across multiple availability zones for high availability and uptime. And that control plane basically handles everything from identity management of your users. So when they log in with the identity provider of your choosing, they would have access to specific desktops or applications, resources that you delegate for them. We're also handling the actual brokering of the users into their sessions. We're handling any kind of integration with your public cloud or your on-prem deployment infrastructure. And then we're also handling all the policies and the control plane for your administrators to manage and make changes to the environment. So all of that is kept up to date and automatically upgraded for our customers as a service. So in terms of features and functionality, the first thing to know is that with Frame, we have our own remoting protocol. It's called the Frame remoting protocol. This protocol is really originally designed for video streaming to browsers to be able to deliver high graphics 3D content to users over long distances with a great user experience. It is based on H.264 from a codec perspective, and again, it's optimized for WAN and low bandwidth scenarios. In terms of key features and functionality of Frame, I'll kind of touch on these, but you can do things like copy and paste into Frame, copy and paste out of Frame. You can disable or enable that granularly. How we handle things like printing is very unique to Frame, and also it makes it very easy to address a work from home type of deployment, right? I kind of mentioned that before in terms of peripherals. So typically with other VDI solutions, when you want to print to a local printer that's USB attached to your end user device, there's a few options. Option one would be to use something that's known as a universal print driver, right? And you hope that that UPD works for the printer your user's trying to print to. Option two would really just be to install the native driver for that printer. So if you have a Canon MX printer, right, you would directly install that print driver right onto your virtual desktop image, right? From there you would then send the print job from your VDI into your printer. The challenge with that is that obviously not every single printer out there will be supported, and installing a bunch of different print drivers can be very time consuming from an administrative perspective, and it can also eventually cause corruption to the print subsystem. So with Frame, we kind of really rethought the way to handle printing, especially from work from home and BYO scenarios, is that when you print in Frame, Frame automatically converts that print job into a PDF. that PDF gets automatically downloaded to your endpoint device. And then from there, we're actually prompting the users to select whatever local printers they have configured from their endpoint device. So what's great about that is end users know what they are. They're used to seeing it day in and day out. And as soon as they select the printer they want to print to, that PDF document just gets automatically sent to that printer, right? So it makes it very easy for administrators to support a wide variety of printer vendors and models very quickly without ever having to worry about installing print drivers. Steve Shaw had a question online. What do you consider low bandwidth? So I would say, for Frame, if you're talking about mostly like back office applications, O365 and some web apps, you're probably talking about about 150 kilobits per second for a session will be considered lower bandwidth. Okay. We support also how we handle local file access. So with your traditional VDI, there's a concept of local client drive mapping, and what that is let's say if you have a Windows laptop, right, you can have that C drive on your Windows laptop passed into your VDI session as another map drive, right, like a F drive or G drive. What we've found is that that can cause a couple of problems. One is that users kind of get confused in terms of where they're actually saving their data, whether it's locally onto their endpoint device or they're being saved into their actual virtual desktop, right? With Frame, we again we designed the solution in the early 2010s when it was this whole movement of BYO and work from home, and we realized that in the modern digital workspace, users are using a combination of applications that are local on their device. They're using SaaS applications, and they're using potentially virtual desktop or virtual app delivered applications. So they're kind of moving in and out of those areas. So with Frame, in order to access, let's say a file on your local machine, all you do is drag and drop that file from your local device into the Frame terminal window, and Frame will automatically upload that file to an uploads folder. Same thing with getting files out of Frame. You can simply just drag and drop that file to a downloads folder, and Frame will automatically prompt your users to save it somewhere locally on their endpoint device, right? So I can show you all that in the demo. We do handle multi-monitor support. So we support up to 4 monitors without any kind of GPU on that instance. And we can also demo that as well. In general, USB support outside of printers and mass storage devices, which we already covered previously, but we do support most common HID devices, which are human input devices. So USB keyboards and USB mice and headsets would all be supported out of the box, with Frame. We also handle, we can allow users to disconnect from their session and reconnect from another device. So you can roam your session from device to device as needed. So if a user's working from a certain location and needs to resume working when they get home, they can certainly do so. All right, I got a few more questions. Russ says, what protection is there from something local that is potentially a viral payload with this drag and drop functionality? So you can certainly install a security stack on your virtual desktop image to basically scan for that. And you can also basically disable the ability to be able to upload or download, as well as all these features by the administrator. So you can basically disable that for a certain group of users, enable it for others. Mark DeRamo asks, we are K through 12 and we would like to use on-prem HV. We would like to access 30 concurrent Windows 10 desktops that have Adobe Creative Suite installed. The students are using Chromebooks and all files will be stored on Google Drive. Any issues? Nope. We have a very strong partnership with Google, both from the Chrome side and the GCP side. If you Google, Google and Xyframe partnership, you'll see that. We do have some referenceable customers out there that are using that exact same scenario, right? Using Chromebooks to access a Windows 10 VM. All right. Continuing on in terms of feature functionality, when it comes to persistency, obviously persistency is very important when it comes to virtual desktops. So we do support both non-persistent and persistent desktops. For those of you that are not familiar, what a non-persistent desktop means is that you manage it through a golden image. And basically any kind of changes to that desktop in terms of changes to the registry, changes to the OS would be discarded when the user logs off. So every time they log back in, they get a fresh image to work with. So obviously there's a lot of benefits from a operational perspective and image management perspective, centralized image management. There's also benefits from a security perspective. Yeah, it's, I would say most VDI or end user computing customers who are doing virtual desktops, majority of the workloads are non-persistent. Then again, there are use cases out there that, a persistent desktop makes a lot more sense. And that's really meaning assigning a virtual desktop to a specific user. So each user gets their own unique virtual desktop. Any kind of changes they make to it would persist from session to session, right? For your non-persistent use cases, we do have an enterprise user profile solution built into Frame that is a profile disk, and that does get mounted to the user's non-persistent desktop upon session start, and that will retain any kind of user personalization settings, user application settings, bookmarks, right, wallpapers that would be retained within that enterprise user profile disk. And then lastly, with Frame, so Active Directory domain join, that's very common when you talk about virtual desktops. So with Frame, you can certainly join your desktops to your AD domain, but we also offer the option to do non-domain join instance as well. So you may be wondering what would be a good solution for that. Well, if you're not a big Microsoft Active Directory environment and you don't have Active Directory, right, we can certainly support you. There's also use cases out there for, let's say, external users, whether they're contractors or consultants or external vendors that may need to access a virtual desktop to get their work done. Well, if those users don't need to access any kind of resources that are AD authenticated, then you don't have to give them an AD username or credential. So that gets to the topic of security. So I think the biggest takeaway from a security perspective is how you authenticate your users into Frame. We are primarily integrated with SAML, right, for our authentication. So as long as your identity provider is SAML based, it will work with Frame. So we support integration with Active Directory through ADFS. We support Okta and Ping Federate and Duo, Azure AD, right? Those will all work with Frame. We also have a native integration built in for Google authentication, so through OAuth. So if you want to provide access through your user's Google credentials, you certainly can as well. The great thing about Frame is you can have multiple IDPs in the exact same environment, right? Even to the exact same desktop. So if you want to provide access to different through different IDPs for different users and user groups, you certainly can. Same thing with supporting different Active Directory domains. So we do allow on a per account basis, and I can show you what that means a little bit later on, is that you can assign one account to one Active Directory domain and then another account to a different Active Directory domain. So if you're in an environment that has multiple domains for whatever reason, those will also be supported with Frame. How we handle two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication is we really just leverage whatever configuration you have on your IDP. So for example, internally in Nutanix, we use Okta for our second factor, and Okta basically prompts us to provide a prompt on our cell phone after a certain amount of time, right, if the token expires. So same thing with Frame, we'll basically just leverage that configuration as well. Like I mentioned before, all those features we talked about, the ability to upload and download and print and copy and paste, those can all be controlled by your Frame administrator. And lastly, everything in terms of the delivery stream between our control plane to your resource locations, whether that's on-prem or in the public cloud, to your endpoint devices, that entire stream is fully encrypted over 443, and then data rest is also encrypted as well. Compliance-wise, we meet a number of compliance standards today. So we have our SOC 2 Type 1 and 2, SOC 3 compliance, ISO certifications, 27001, 17, 18. And then we also have a completely separate Frame environment control plane that's hosted in AWS GovCloud. And that meets certain US government federal regulations. So whether it's FedRAMP moderate, which we're in process, which means our audit was completed, to ITAR compliancy, that's available in that environment, right? And if you wanted to, you could deploy into Azure Government, like I mentioned, or AWS GovCloud, and that's all managed by an entirely separate operations and support team. All right, so in terms of the deployment process, really the goal of Frame, and I think I touched upon this already, is really giving flexibility to our customers, as they deploy. A VDI environment is typically a very fluid environment. You start with one use case or a couple use cases. You'll never really add more use cases, right? So, again, first step is really picking out where you want to deploy your Frame workload VMs. So like I mentioned, we do support a wide variety of public cloud providers as well as on-prem on AHV. We talked about IDPs. You have multiple IDPs configured for your environment for different users, different use cases. How you would actually deploy your applications or your desktop image to users. Well, it does vary based on where you're deploying today. If you're deploying on-prem on Nutanix AHV, we give you the ability to basically bring your own image that has all your applications already installed. You'll basically bring that into Frame and then manage and deploy from there. In the public cloud, we don't support BYO image today. So what we do in public cloud is we'll provide you with a baseline image template, with the operating system already there and the Frame components already installed, and then you would log into that base image and install your applications and deploy from there. Okay. And then in terms of getting access to your users' files and data, so if your networking is configured that way, you're deploying to a specific VLAN or VNet or VPC that has access to your Windows file servers or to your SharePoint environment, those can certainly all be mapped within your Frame virtual desktop session. We also have native integrations built into our Frame terminal window for some of the more popular cloud storage providers, so OneDrive and Google Drive, Box, Dropbox. Those are available for you to use to quickly get access, to those repositories. You can always install the native, clients from those providers as well directly onto your Frame virtual desktop image. So both options are available. It really just depends on how you want to provide access. And then lastly, because again, you don't have to worry about going to your users and say, hey, you have to go and download this client or download this plugin. It's all about just pointing them to a specific URL, having them log in with whatever IDP you have configured, and they'll be able to access their resources. We also have the ability for you to give users access through just a URL in terms of like a shortcut that you can place, within your own, maybe your existing, user portal, company portal, whether that's a, SharePoint site or whether that's a web server that you maintain, or even Okta, right? Those are all possibilities, which I can show you in the demo as well. All right. So here are the operating systems we support today with Frame from a GA perspective across the different infrastructures, with Frame. So on-prem AHV support Windows 10 in 2016. And then in terms of AWS, Azure, and GCP, you'll see that we're probably most mature today in AWS. That's kind of where we first started. And then we added support for Azure and then added support for GCP. So if you want to do native Windows 10 in the public cloud, just know that we only support that in Azure today. If you want to deploy into AWS or GCP, most customers will run it on a Server 2016 virtual machine and run desktop experience. So it basically looks like Windows 10. So that's also doable. Just know that with the Frame subscription, the Frame subscription does not include any kind of public cloud utilization fees, right? That's that's separate. We are a cloud agnostic solution, so you would bring your own AWS, Azure, GCP environment. We also give customers the option to use Nutanix's AWS, Azure, GCP subscriptions as an option as well. In case you guys don't have your own accounts available. So we'll talk about that later on, as a second option to deploy. But you'd also be responsible for making sure that you have the proper OS licensing, for these, virtual, desktops. So if you want to do, Windows 10, it would be a Windows VDA entitlement, or if you have an enterprise agreement with Microsoft that provides you with client software assurance rights, those will all also give you the ability to use Windows 10 in the public cloud, right? If you're using a server-based OS, you can choose to bring your RDS CALs if you're deploying on-prem, or Microsoft offers what's called an RDS SAL, subscriber access license, that you can actually purchase through Nutanix if desired. All right, so for the folks that want to get a little bit more in the weeds, we do have the slide around our platform architecture. So the key thing to note here is that on the left, it would be your public cloud subscription or subscriptions. And then on the right would be your private cloud. So this will be your on-prem AHV cluster or clusters, right? That you would then link with what's in the middle, which is that Frame cloud control plane. Again, that's what's hosted for our customers as that service. I would say the most important takeaway here is that once a user is brokered into the VM that is hosting their virtual desktop or virtual application session. That's a direct connection at that point between the end user device and that VM. Okay, we're not routing our that protocol, that streaming protocol, into our control plane and then back to the VM. It will be a direct connection. Okay, if you're deploying into public cloud and you want to use public IP address spacing there, you certainly can with Frame. If you want to deploy it into like a private VNet or private VPC with private IPs, we do have what's included with Frame. It's called a streaming gateway appliance. This is a Linux virtual appliance running on CentOS. It's a very lightweight appliance, and this is basically acting as a reverse proxy for any kind of users coming in over the internet that want to access your internal environment, right? So this is also available. You can deploy this into your public cloud as well. All right. So in terms of hierarchy, this slide is very important because this is how you would structure your Frame environment, and we designed it so that it can be very flexible and extensible. As you build out your environment, at the top level would be your customer entity. This is really where you would set, any kind of global settings. It was also where you would choose what kind of subscription model you want to use with Frame. We have two primary subscription models. One is a named user, and then one would be a max concurrent instance subscription. By default, a max concurrent instance subscription is twice as expensive as a named user. But let's kind of quickly touch upon the differences. So named user, basically each unique user in your environment would get their own named user subscription. That will allow that user to launch as many sessions as they want, launch simultaneous sessions if they needed to, access multiple accounts. A lot of flexibility there. So if you have a scenario where, let's say you have 1,000 total users and most of them are using Frame day in and day out in a work from home scenario, it makes sense to basically license each user with a named user subscription. If, however, you have 1,000 total users that are potentially working from home, but your peak usage is, let's say 200, right? Then what you can do is you can purchase 200 max concurrent instances, and those 1,000 users can share that pool of 200 workload VMs to support their virtual desktop or virtual applications. Okay. Right now, each customer entity can only have one subscription model. So, you either got to choose either named user or concurrent instance. However, you could have multiple customer entities with Frame, if you want to do both for different, use cases. And just know that, from a control plane perspective, you can manage both customer entities from the same control plane. So it makes it very easy to do so. Within the customer entity, underneath that level would be a layer of abstraction called organizations. You have to have at least one organization configured in your environment. The reason why you want to create more organizations is because at this level is you can do a few things. One, you can assign different administrators, to an organization. You can assign different policies at an organization level. You can view analytics at a different at an organization level and metrics in terms of how your environment's being used. You can assign different public cloud subscriptions at this level. So if you want to do like granular chargeback, you could say, hey, I'm going to create, let's say, a GCP subscription for my marketing team, and then another one for my sales team, and link my marketing subscription to my marketing org, and then my sales subscription, right, to my sales organization, right? So that's also doable. And also, lastly, you can at the organization level, you can assign different identity providers. So if you want to provide access through let's say Azure AD on one org, but Ping Federate through another, you can certainly do so. And then lastly, at the very bottom are the accounts themselves. So a Frame account is basically a production pool. You can think of it that way. But each workload VM within your overall environment will belong to a specific Frame account. A Frame account is also tied to a specific either AHV cluster, or it's also tied to a specific public cloud vendor and region. So to give you an example on this slide, right, let's say you had a Windows 10 gold image that is deployed for your marketing team, right? And that is deployed into, let's say, Azure, West US. That'll be one account within Frame. If you wanted to deploy the exact same Windows 10 image for marketing users, right, into Azure East, that'd be a separate account within Frame, okay? You are allowed, we do give you the ability to clone or copy your gold image from one account to the other, as long as it shares the same backend infrastructure. So you can clone from Azure to Azure, you can clone from AWS to AWS, GCP to GCP, but you can't clone from, let's say, Azure to